breakthrough. So the rest are preparation, if you think about it. Go to the quiet place, reflect on how God sees you, take your eyes off the circumstances and see your error or the crisis you have as a miracle opportunity for God. They're all points of reflection. Now we get to the action point, because the next step is step 5. Find God's promises for your circumstance, because the Bible tells us that those promises are covenant promises. You can find them in it, and we find the blessings, we find our inheritance. In 2 Peter it tells us this, through his promises. So that's where we need to go to find what does God promise for our circumstances. And so when we go and look at it, and here is the thing, I believe there is not a circumstance in any of our lives that the promise of God cannot be found in his word. Bar none. I believe every thing that could possibly be we are challenged with in our life, God has a promise for it somehow in his word. We need to find it, because what we're going to be doing is, when we find those promises, we're going to be standing on them. They're his word, they're his covenant, and there is our stepping stone to our breakthrough. Okay, so when we look at the promises, and you know, some of them are well-known promises. Basically, there are scriptures. So just get me glasses here. There are scriptures here that from John 14:13, and it says, "And whatever you ask in my name, that I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. And if you ask anything in my name, I will do it." There is an incredible promise. I don't see any conditions in that. Do you? And so, that whatever we ask in his name, right? There are other promises that says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, that you can ask the Father anything in my name and I will do it. The same thing. It's repeated a number of times in the scriptures. We need to hold on to those promises, because they are covenant promises to you and I. Immaterial of what the crisis is, God has a way. You may not see it at the time, but you're living and standing on the on the promises, because there is where you will get out of your problem. There are some basic ones that we know. The promise that he told us not to worry about what we eat or drink. You know, this could be a crisis for many people these days. We find that we've started a food supply service, delivery service, and there's so many people who are in need of this right now, that because they've lost their jobs and whatever it is. And so God's word for them is, don't worry about what you eat or drink. But you've no food on your table, and he tells you don't worry. Yeah, because he will find a way in that circumstances to glorify his name. That's where you're one step away from your miracle. I know that. I shared it in the message we did whenever I spoke last, about the circumstances around that in my life. At a very early stage, he showed me that word, don't worry about what you eat or drink, is true and will always remain true, and it's his promise, immaterial. So when you're out of food or provision, Jehovah Jireh will provide, but you need to trust him. So, having found his promises, that may take a little bit of searching. It certainly can only be done from your quiet place, because you need to create space to be able to do that. And when we were down in Mayo, that's what we were doing. We were studying these promises, taking them on board, taking our eyes off the circumstances. It was easy to do that because we were away. If I'd been back on my office, I just don't know how I would have been able to do that. But we were away. We were thanking him for his promises, but he was getting his work done back at home while we were down doing that. And basically that was, we came back strengthened. And so, having found his promises, then the 6th step is that you need to take a step of faith. So when you've found his promises, you talk to him, you stand on those promises. You still don't know how he's going to work it out, but he is going to prompt you in a particular direction. Now I want to bring you back to that little question that man asked me in that office that day, and he says, would you like me to talk to you or something? And I said, whatever, bad attitude. But I said yes to that. That was the seed sown, because when I came back, one of those providers that he had gone to, with my permission, having asked me, came to me. I'd never met him before. But that man bought that contract off me for 300,000 euros. Remember, my debt was 180,000. That was a miracle. But it saved us from a certain collapse of God's business, not caused by God, but caused by me. So now we have the miracle happen in front of our eyes, and that's what happened. But the lesson that we learn through that will remain with us forever. So what I'm saying to you, if you are faced with a crisis, whatever it is today, if you will follow those 6 steps, God will speak to you in the little voice behind your ear to turn to the left or the right. That's from Isaiah, the scripture again, 15 to 21 in chapter 30. You will find that same thing. He will speak to you. He will also speak to you through the circumstances that are in front of you. But we need to have an attentive eye and an attentive ear to see what he's doing in front of you. Because that man asking me the question, I didn't know what the significance of that at the time, but by the grace of God, I answered it correctly, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have had the breakthrough. But there are other circumstances. There will be people turning up in your life that you'll be saying, no, what are they turning up for? There's a purpose in everything that goes on around you in that time. You need to be alert, to be aware. God can use every circumstances for your rescue. He will do so. The most craziest of situations. I'm reminded of, well, again, the widow with the oil. What a crazy situation. A little jar of oil inside in the room, and he asked her to go and start pouring it into the empty vessels that were probably 10 times bigger than the little jar she had. Yet, it filled every one of them. God's miracle from what seemed like a crazy situation. That is the God that you and I need to get to know. That is the God that I have come to know through the experiences that he's brought us through. And it is absolutely aligned with his word. His word will never fail. It will never go out and come back void. So let me encourage today that, you know, if you will take those 6 steps and start to apply them, I don't care what your circumstances, your attitude towards them will have to change. Because if you're going to follow the steps, you can't keep looking at the circumstances. You've got to take your eyes off them. You have to go to your quiet place. You've got to reflect on how God has seen you. That will lift you up. Then you will find his promises. You will find them. He will cause them to light up in front of you when you start to spend that time with him in his word. And he will create circumstances around you that will make no sense, but they're for your purpose. And the purpose is to rescue you, to overcome the challenge, whatever it is you have. That is the God that I've come to know. And I believe he is the same God for you as for me. He has no favourites. He just gives, some of us have to go through painful lessons. But he took me through a painful lesson in that. But it had a good purpose because he rescued me. But I'm here to share this today with you so that you don't have to go through some crisis in your life and not have victory. And not be sucked in and maybe caught up with health issues. That's what's happening right now. People are developing health problems with being unable to deal with the crisis. Because we all know medically, fear has the ability to cause you health problems. But fear is not of God. Fear is of the devil. And so we need to be able to overcome all these things. And so those 6 steps, they're true from his word. And I believe in my experience in life, and I'm not the only person, because I have people who've come into my office in my business day in day out for many years now in crisis, and they were looking for a man's solution. They never got one. I gave them a God solution, and those who choose to listen to that also had those results. I have loads of stories that I could tell you, and people, if I bring them, they would tell you the same stories about those same 6 steps. God's victory in an impossible time. It was never the person's victory, because he wants to be glorified, to draw all men unto him. So I hope that you have enjoyed this message. I hope, as I said, it would be impossible for you to get the fullness of it right now, but you're going to have it on YouTube, and I hope that you have pen and paper and have written down the 6 steps. I'm going to repeat them before I finish so that we can. The first one is you go to your quiet place. The second one is that you reflect on how Jesus sees you, how God sees you. Take time to reflect. The third step is that you take your eyes off the circumstances. The fourth one is you see your crisis as a miracle opportunity for God. The fifth one is you find God's promises for your circumstances. And the sixth step is you take a step of faith to do what God is telling you to do. Give you an example of that just to finish. Peter, he fancied the idea of walking on water when he saw Jesus walking again towards him. He said, Lord, can I walk on water too? And Jesus said, sure, come on. But here's the thing. Peter would never have walked on water unless he got out of the boat. He had to step out of the boat into the unknown, knowing that there was probably hundreds of feet of water below him, that by any natural phenomenon he would have sunk and drowned. Yet, he kept his eyes on Jesus and he walked on water. And the Bible tells us that the only time where he panicked and started to sink was when he took his eyes off Jesus and looked at the storm. Right? And Jesus had to rescue him. There is the closing part of this message. You will eventually have to take a step of faith to trust. So all the building up, without the step of faith, you still won't find your breakthrough, because otherwise it wouldn't be faith. So thank you all for listening to this message, and I pray the Lord will bless you, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the near future. Thank you.